Please have a seat.
This isn't gonna work on me.
No. Do not fuck with us!
Say it.
Because
Say it.
we're the same person.
Have you ever caught yourself doing something completely out of character? Maybe you, yes, you, the most patient person in your friend group, suddenly snapped at a cashier for no good reason. Or perhaps you, the eternal optimist, found yourself spiraling into a pit of cynicism after reading the news. What if I told you that these moments aren't random glitches in your personality, but windows into a hidden part of yourself that holds the key to your life's purpose? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving headfirst into the murky waters of the human psyche with one of history's most fascinating thinkers, Carl Jung. And not just any Jung concept, we're talking about the shadow, the dark, mysterious underbelly of your consciousness that you pretend doesn't exist, but might actually be the most important part of you. But fair warning, this isn't your typical self-help pep talk. We're going to venture into territory that might make you uncomfortable. Because according to Jung, true psychological growth isn't about embracing your best qualities, it's about confronting your worst ones. So, if you're ready to meet the part of yourself you've been hiding from all these years and discover how it might just contain the blueprint for your life's purpose, then stick around. This is going to get interesting. Before we dive into the shadow, let's get to know the man who brought this concept into the modern consciousness. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't always destined to become one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. Born in 1875 in rural Switzerland to a poor pastor father and an eccentric, possibly mentally ill mother, young Carl's childhood was, let's just say, complex. Jung once wrote about his mother. By day she was a loving mother, but at night she seemed uncanny. From an early age, Jung was exposed to the duality of human nature, the light and the dark, residing in the same person. Sound familiar to our topic today? Jung started as a psychiatrist working at a mental hospital in Zurich, where he became fascinated with the strange stories and symbols that appeared in his patients' delusions. This led him to Sigmund Freud, and for several years, these two titans of psychology were the closest of intellectual allies. But here's where it gets juicy. Jung and Freud had a dramatic falling out, one that would change the course of psychology forever. While Freud insisted that human motivation was primarily driven by repressed sexual desires, Jung believed there was something deeper at work. Their split was so bitter that Freud allegedly once fainted during an argument with Jung. Talk about academic drama. But this intellectual divorce allowed Jung to develop his own school of thought, analytical psychology. And thank goodness he did, because what Jung discovered next would revolutionize our understanding of the human mind. He began to recognize patterns in the dreams, art, and stories of people from completely different cultures and time periods, symbols and themes that seemed universal despite having no connection to each other. This led to his theory of the collective unconscious, the idea that beneath our personal unconscious lies a shared reservoir of experiences inherited from our ancestors. And within this collective unconscious lived what Jung called archetypes, universal characters and motifs that appear across human experience. And among these archetypes, one stood out as particularly crucial to our psychological development, the shadow. But before we meet this shadow, let me ask you, have you ever done something and immediately thought, that wasn't me, I don't know what came over me? Well, I hate to break it to you, but according to Jung, that was you, just not the you want to admit to being. So what exactly is this shadow that Jung was so obsessed with? In Jung's own words, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. In simpler terms, your shadow contains everything about yourself that you don't want to admit exists. It's the warehouse where you store all the parts of yourself that don't fit with your self-image, your shameful impulses, your repressed desires, your unacceptable qualities. Think of it this way. From early childhood, we learn what behaviors get us love and acceptance, and which ones get us rejected. If you showed anger as a child and were punished for it, You might have learned to push that anger deep down inside, denying its existence. That anger didn't disappear. It became part of your shadow. But here's the twist, and this is crucial. The shadow isn't just negative traits. It also contains positive qualities that we've rejected or denied for various reasons. Maybe you have tremendous creative potential, but grew up in a family that valued practical skills over artistic expression. That creativity didn't vanish. It was relegated to your shadow. And that's where things get really interesting. Because Jung believed that our shadow, this repository of disowned parts of ourselves, contains not just our deepest wounds, but also our greatest gifts. Let me give you a concrete example. Consider someone who was raised to be utterly selfless, always putting others first, never expressing their own needs. Their shadow might contain healthy selfishness and self-prioritization. Until they integrate these shadow elements, they'll likely suffer from burnout and resentment, never finding true balance. But here's the troubling part about the shadow. The more you deny it, the darker and more powerful it becomes. Jung warned, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Unacknowledged shadow elements don't just disappear, they emerge in distorted, often destructive ways. They leak out in passive-aggressive comments, in sudden outbursts, in self-sabotaging behaviors, and even in our harsh judgments of others. And that brings us to one of Jung's most profound insights. What triggers you in others is usually a clue to what lies in your own shadow. Think about it. Is there someone who absolutely drives you crazy? Maybe a colleague whose arrogance makes your blood boil? Or a friend whose neediness exhausts you? According to Jung, your extreme emotional reactions are a mirror, reflecting back elements of yourself that you've disowned and pushed into the shadow. As Jung put it, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But I know what you're thinking. Great, so I've got this shadow full of my worst qualities. How exactly is this going to reveal my life's purpose? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Now, let's dig into how confronting your shadow can unveil your life's purpose. And trust me, this is where Jung's ideas get really transformative. Here's where Jung's genius really shines. He didn't just identify the shadow as a psychological concept, he recognized it as a gateway to what he called individuation. Individuation is Jung's term for the process of integrating the unconscious into consciousness, of becoming whole and fully yourself. And guess what stands between you and this wholeness? You guessed it, your shadow. Jung wrote, "There is no light without shadow and no psychic wholeness without imperfection." This might be one of the most liberating psychological insights ever offered. It means that your flaws, your contradictions, your dark side, these aren't obstacles to overcome on your journey to fulfillment. They're essential ingredients. Think of it like this. Imagine trying to understand a story by reading only the happy parts. You'd miss the conflict, the tension, the challenges that give the narrative meaning. Similarly, trying to live while acknowledging only your positive traits creates a partial, fragmented existence. But when you begin to explore your shadow, to bring those disowned parts of yourself into consciousness, something magical happens. You discover hidden talents, unexpected strengths, and authentic desires that have been buried under years of conditioning and social expectations. Let me share a story to illustrate this. There's a famous anecdote about Jung working with a priest who was struggling with his faith. This priest was the model of piety and devotion, yet he felt empty inside. Through their work together, Jung helped him recognize that he had relegated all his earthly desires and instincts to his shadow. In denying these aspects, he had denied his full humanity. The breakthrough came when the priest allowed himself to acknowledge his natural human desires without shame. By integrating these shadow elements, he didn't abandon his faith. Instead, it became more authentic and meaningful. His purpose wasn't found in perfection, but in wholeness. Now, let's make this personal. Think about qualities you judge harshly in others. Are you irritated by people who are too loud, too ambitious, too emotional, too analytical? These judgments often point to disowned parts of yourself. And here's where we connect to purpose. Jung believed that what you're most drawn to and most repelled by contains clues to your true calling. The tension between your conscious identity and your shadow creates an energy that, when harnessed, can guide you toward your authentic path. In Jung's view, your purpose isn't something you invent or choose from a catalog of possibilities. It emerges from the unique constellation of your whole psyche, including your shadow. By integrating these disowned aspects, you recover energy that was previously spent on repression and denial, freeing it up for creative and purposeful expression. Or, as Jung himself put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that includes the parts of yourself you've been hiding in the shadows. But I know what you're wondering. How exactly do you access this shadow? How do you begin this integration process? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore next. So you're ready to meet your shadow? Good. Let's talk about how to do that without getting completely swallowed by the darkness. Don't worry. Despite how ominous shadow work might sound, this isn't about performing midnight rituals or summoning psychological demons. It's a thoughtful, intentional process of self-discovery that Jung outlined with a remarkable clarity. Here are some Jungian-approved methods for shadow work. First, pay attention to your emotional triggers. When you have an outsized emotional reaction to someone, ask yourself, what about this person's behavior is triggering me so intensely? Then, the harder question, how might I possess this same quality in a way I haven't acknowledged? For instance, if you're enraged by someone's selfishness, ask yourself where you might need to be more selfish in a healthy way. If you're disgusted by someone's vulnerability, consider where you might be afraid to be vulnerable yourself. Second, analyze your dreams. Jung considered dreams the royal road to the unconscious. He wrote, "Dreams are impartial, spontaneous products of the unconscious psyche, outside the control of the will. They are pure nature." In dreams, your shadow often appears as a figure of the same gender as you, sometimes threatening or pursuing you. These dreams aren't just random neural firings. They're communications from your unconscious, often revealing shadow material that's seeking integration. Keep a dream journal by your bedside. Write down your dreams immediately upon waking, before they fade. Look for recurring figures, emotions, or scenarios. What parts of yourself might these elements represent? Third, examine your projections. Jung noted that we constantly project our unconscious material onto others. When you find yourself making sweeping judgments, all politicians are corrupt, artists are impractical dreamers, you're likely projecting aspects of your shadow. Ask yourself, what would it mean if this quality I see in others actually exists within me? This isn't about blaming yourself for everything, but about recognizing the psychological principle that we can only truly see in others what exists in some form within ourselves. Fourth, create or engage with art. Jung was big on what he called active imagination, a method of dialoguing with unconscious material through creative expression. Drawing, writing, movement, music, these can all be vehicles for shadow material to emerge in a contained, constructive way. Try this. Draw your shadow as you imagine it. Don't overthink it. Just let your hand move. Then have an imaginary conversation with this figure. What does it want you to know? What has it been trying to tell you? Finally, consider working with a Jungian analyst or therapist. Shadow work can stir up powerful emotions and memories. Having a trained guide can make the process safer and more productive. Now, I want to be clear about something. Shadow work isn't about indulging destructive impulses. It's about recognizing these impulses, understanding their origins, and transforming their energy into something constructive. As Jung himself cautioned, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. The goal isn't to act out your shadow, it's to integrate it, to bring its energy and insights into conscious awareness so they can be channeled purposefully. And this brings us to a crucial point. Shadow work isn't a weekend project. It's a lifelong practice of increasing self-awareness and psychological integration. But the rewards, greater authenticity, reduced projection, more available energy, and yes, clearer purpose, are worth the effort. Now, let's look at how this shadow integration has manifested in some real-life examples, both historical and contemporary. Let's bring Jung's concepts to life with some compelling examples of shadow integration and what happens when the shadow's denied. Consider Gandhi, a man revered worldwide for his commitment to nonviolence and political change. What's less discussed is Gandhi's intense inner struggle with anger and violence. In his autobiography, he candidly describes his youthful rage and even violent impulses. Rather than denying these shadow elements, Gandhi acknowledged them. He didn't pretend to be naturally peaceful. He recognized his capacity for violence and consciously channeled that energy into his political resistance. His power came not from an absence of darkness, but from its integration. On the flip side, consider the many public figures, politicians, religious leaders, celebrities, who project an image of moral perfection while secretly acting out their unacknowledged shadows in destructive ways. The news is full of such stories. The anti-corruption crusader caught in bribery, the family values politician embroiled in scandal, the wellness guru with a secret addiction. Jung would see these not as simple hypocrisies, but as tragic failures of shadow integration. When we deny our shadow, it doesn't disappear. It emerges in distorted, often destructive forms. Literature gives us perfect illustrations of the shadow concept. Think of Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a literal depiction of a shadow personality breaking free from repression. Or consider Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, where the protagonist's shadow manifests as a portrait that bears the marks of his corrupt actions while he remains outwardly beautiful. In more contemporary terms, consider how many people experience midlife crises. From a Jungian perspective, these aren't simply age-related breakdowns, but opportunities for shadow integration that have been too long delayed. The executive who suddenly quits to become an artist, the devoted parent who suddenly needs space for themselves, the rule follower who suddenly breaks convention. These are often examples of the shadow demanding attention after decades of neglect. Let me share something personal. Years ago, I prided myself on being rational, logical, and in control. I judged emotional people as weak and irrational. Can you guess what happened? My unacknowledged emotional needs erupted in increasingly chaotic ways, inappropriate emotional outbursts, inexplicable anxiety, even physical symptoms. My shadow was sending me a message that I refused to hear, that emotions are a valid, essential part of human experience. Only when I began to acknowledge and integrate my emotional side did I find balance and, yes, a clearer sense of purpose that included both rational thought and emotional intelligence. The point is this: your shadow contains not just what you fear about yourself, but often what you need to complete yourself. Integration doesn't mean your shadow disappears. It means its energy becomes available to you in constructive rather than destructive ways. Now, let's address some common questions and misconceptions about the shadow that might be arising for you at this point. Let's tackle some questions you might be having about this whole shadow business. Isn't accepting my shadow just an excuse for bad behavior? This is perhaps the most common misconception about Jung's shadow work. The answer is a resounding no. Shadow integration isn't about acting out your darkest impulses. It's about acknowledging them consciously so they don't control you unconsciously. Think of it this way. If you deny you have anger, that anger doesn't disappear. It goes underground and emerges in passive-aggressive comments, subtle sabotage, or psychosomatic symptoms. By acknowledging I have anger in me, you gain the ability to choose how you respond to that emotion. As Jung put it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Is my shadow all negative qualities? Another great question. And no, your shadow isn't just a trash bin for your worst traits. Remember, your shadow contains everything that doesn't fit your conscious self-image, including positive qualities. For instance, if you were raised to be humble and self-effacing, your natural confidence and leadership abilities might have been pushed into your shadow. If you were taught that success comes only through serious hard work, your capacity for playfulness and joy might be in your shadow. This is why shadow work can be so revelatory for finding your purpose. Often, our greatest gifts and passions are hiding in the shadow because, at some point, we received the message that these parts of ourselves weren't acceptable or valuable. Can I ever fully integrate my shadow? Jung would say, no. Shadow integration is a lifelong process, not a one-time achievement. The unconscious is vast, and as you integrate certain shadow elements, deeper layers emerge. Think of it as a spiral, rather than a linear journey. You'll likely find yourself revisiting similar themes throughout life, but with greater awareness and from different perspectives each time. And that's actually good news. It means the journey of self-discovery never ends. There's always more to learn about yourself, more potential to uncover. Is shadow work dangerous? It can be challenging, certainly. When you begin to acknowledge disowned parts of yourself, it can temporarily disrupt your sense of identity and bring up difficult emotions. That's why it's important to approach shadow work with support, whether that's a therapist, trusted friends, or a solid self-care practice. Go at a pace that feels manageable, and remember that integration is a gradual process. The greater danger, according to Jung, lies in not doing shadow work. He famously stated, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." How does this relate to other spiritual or psychological traditions? Great question. Jung's concept of the shadow has parallels in many traditions. In Buddhism, it resembles the practice of acknowledging and working with difficult emotions rather than suppressing them. In certain Christian traditions, it echoes the idea that acknowledging one's sinful nature is the first step toward redemption. Even modern psychological approaches like internal family systems therapy or parts work have clear connections to Jung's shadow concept. The idea that disowned parts of ourselves need acknowledgement and integration rather than suppression. Now that we've clarified some common questions, let's pull everything together and explore how shadow integration can specifically reveal your life's purpose. We've arrived at the heart of our exploration. How does confronting your shadow reveal your life's purpose? Jung believed that your purpose, or what he might call your individuation path, emerges from the tension between opposing forces in your psyche. Your conscious identity and your shadow represent such a polarity. When these opposing forces are acknowledged and held in conscious awareness, a third thing emerges, something new, creative, and uniquely yours. As Jung wrote, "The greater the contrast, the greater the potential. Great energy only comes from a correspondingly great tension between opposites." Let's make this concrete. Here are 3 ways your shadow holds clues to your purpose. First, what you judge most harshly in others often represents a disowned talent or quality in yourself. The person who criticizes others for showing off might have untapped performance abilities. The one who judges dreamers might have suppressed their own visionary thinking. Ask yourself, what qualities do I consistently criticize in others? How might those qualities, if consciously integrated, enhance my life? Second, recurring patterns of self-sabotage often point to shadow elements seeking expression. If you repeatedly undermine relationships, career opportunities, or personal growth, your shadow may be communicating something important. For instance, someone who sabotages career advancement might discover that their true purpose involves more creative autonomy than their current path offers. The sabotage isn't the problem, it's a symptom pointing toward the solution. Third, your fascinations and obsessions, even negative ones, contain purpose clues. Jung noted that the psyche doesn't invest energy randomly. If you're drawn to certain subjects, themes, or activities, even if they seem impractical or strange, they likely connect to your purpose. Consider the corporate lawyer who can't stop reading crime novels, perhaps pointing to an unexplored fascination with justice and human motivation. Or the accountant who secretly binges fashion design shows, possibly indicating an unacknowledged creative gift. The integration of shadow elements doesn't just heal psychological splits, it releases energy previously used for repression. This liberated energy becomes available for creative and purposeful expression. Your purpose, from a Jungian perspective, isn't about finding the right career or life path from a menu of options. It's about becoming wholly yourself, including the parts you've been running from, and allowing your unique contribution to emerge from that wholeness. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you think you should be, not who others want you to be, not a sanitized, shadow-free version of yourself, but your complete, authentic self, shadow and all. Take a moment to reflect. What parts of yourself have you been hiding from? What qualities do you judge most harshly in others? What recurring patterns or fascinations keep appearing in your life? Your answers contain valuable clues to your purpose. As we draw this exploration to a close, let's consider how you might begin or deepen your own journey of shadow integration. We've traveled deep into Jung's concept of the shadow and its connection to finding your life's purpose. Now let's bring this journey home with some final thoughts. We've discovered that the shadow isn't just a psychological concept, it's a gateway to wholeness. By acknowledging and integrating the disowned parts of ourselves, we not only heal inner divisions, but unlock energy and insights crucial for finding our authentic path. As Jung wisely observed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So, where do you go from here? If you're feeling called to begin or deepen your shadow work, here are 3 simple steps you can take. First, commit to curiosity over judgment. When you notice strong emotional reactions, particularly negative ones, get curious instead of critical. Ask yourself, what might this reaction be telling me about myself? Second, create a regular practice of self-reflection. This could be journaling, meditation, artistic expression, or meaningful conversations with trusted others. The key is to create space to notice and acknowledge the full spectrum of your thoughts, feelings, and impulses. Third, be compassionate with yourself through this process. Shadow work isn't about beating yourself up for having negative qualities. It's about embracing your full humanity with kindness and understanding. I want to share something personal with you. Working with my own shadow has been the most challenging and most rewarding journey of my life. It hasn't made me perfect. It hasn't eliminated my flaws or insecurities, but it has made me more whole, more authentic, and clearer about why I'm here and what I have to offer. And that's what I wish for you. Not a life free of darkness, that's neither possible nor desirable, but a life where darkness and light are acknowledged, integrated, and channeled toward your unique expression in the world. I'd love to hear about your experiences with shadow work in the comments below. What shadow elements have you discovered? How has acknowledging them shifted your understanding of yourself and your purpose? If you found this exploration valuable, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with someone who might benefit from it. We dive into fascinating philosophical and psychological concepts like this regularly, always with an eye toward practical application. In our next video, we'll be exploring Jung's concept of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to be trying to tell us something. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Remember, as Jung taught us, the gold is often found in the shadow. Your wholeness and your purpose awaits not in perfection, but in integration. Until next time, keep exploring both your light and your darkness. They're both essential parts of your magnificent human journey.